They denied my 80-year-old grandmother's pension after 32 years of work. And what happened one day later is the reason this story is not over yet. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and if you have ever watched someone you love get talked down to by a person who thinks a title makes them untouchable, keep watching, because this is not where it ends. The air conditioning in Gregory Hale's office hummed too loud for a room this quiet. My grandmother's hands sat folded on top of the manila folder like she was afraid to open it again, like the papers inside might change if she looked at them twice. She had asked him a simple question. Why now, after 32 years, why was her pension suddenly under review? Hale had not answered it directly the first time, and he was not answering it now either. I sat beside her with my legal pad on my knee, pen uncapped, writing down every word he said in his own language, because people like Gregory Hale choose their words carefully when they think no one is checking. The nameplate on his desk caught the light. Hale Manufacturing Company. Gold letters, polished that morning, probably the kind of thing a company buys when it wants to look permanent. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, folding his hands the same way my grandmother had folded hers, but his were steady. I understand this is frustrating, but the review process exists for a reason. What reason? My grandmother asked. Her voice did not shake, even though her hands did. Hale glanced at his monitor instead of her. Administrative discrepancies, he said. Things get flagged over time. I asked if I could see what exactly had been flagged. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since we sat down, and something in his expression made it clear he had already decided who mattered in this room and who did not. That is really a conversation for your grandmother and the company, he said. My grandmother nodded, the way she always nodded when she was trying to make things easier for everyone else in the room but herself. Hale closed the folder before she had even finished her next question. The decision is final, he said, and it is not up for discussion. He almost smiled when he said it. That smile did not last as long as he wanted it to, because that was the exact moment Diane Foster, the young HR assistant standing near the filing cabinet, decided to speak up like my grandmother was not already sitting right there. Mrs. Mitchell, do you understand what we mean by administrative discrepancy? Diane asked, raising her voice the way people do when they assume age means the same thing as confusion. She said it slowly, one word at a time, like she was talking to a child instead of a woman who had worked the assembly floor, and then the front office of this company for 32 years. My grandmother did not answer right away. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old laminated badge photo, faded orange lanyard still attached. Her face 30 years younger looking back at both of us. I know exactly what I contributed, she said, setting the badge photo gently on the desk. I was here before half this building existed. Diane glanced at Hale like she expected him to correct her. He did not. I asked calmly if we could see the original pension enrollment paperwork, the vesting schedule, anything with a date and a signature on it so we could understand what discrepancy they were referring to. Hale slid a single folder half an inch closer to himself, not further, just enough that it was clearly no longer up for offering. That really isn't something we share outside of the employee directly, he said. And with respect, this isn't really a conversation for family members to be part of. I looked at my grandmother's hands again. Steady this time. I am not just a family member, I said. I am the person she asked to come with her today, and she has every right to have someone review this with her. Company policy, Diane said quickly, like she had rehearsed it that morning. There was a folder on the corner of the desk, separate from the one Hale had pulled closer, a single page sticking out just enough that I could see a header printed at the top, a case number, a date range, something that did not match anything Hale had said out loud in that room. I did not ask about it. I reached for my phone instead like I was checking a text message, and photographed the corner of that page without lifting it, without touching the desk, without giving Hale or Diane a single reason to think I had seen anything at all. Hale stood up. Hale stood up, smoothed his tie, and walked us out himself, like he wanted to be the one to close the door behind us rather than leave that job to Diane. The letter came exactly 1 week later. It arrived on a Tuesday, company letterhead, the kind of envelope that looks official even before you open it. My grandmother set her reading glasses on before she touched it, the way she always did with anything that mattered, and I watched her face while she read it out loud at her kitchen table. Pension permanently forfeited. Insufficient vesting period. She read that line twice like it might rearrange itself into something that made sense the second time. 32 years, she said, not to me, not really to anyone. The federal minimum for vesting isn't even close to that. I train new hires under the old vesting rules myself. I sat down across from her and reached for the letter, and underneath it on the same table was a stack of paper she had not mentioned yet. Medical billing statements, a scheduling confirmation for a procedure she had been saving toward for over a year, and a cancellation notice dated 2 days earlier. You canceled it, I said. I will reschedule when things settle down, she said. Folding the cancellation notice in half like that would make it smaller. Above the table on the wall hung a framed photo from her 25th work anniversary, a company banner behind her, a cake with her name misspelled, a version of Hale Manufacturing that had once thrown her a party for showing up every single day for a quarter century. My Uncle Rick came by that evening, and my mother, and for an hour the kitchen filled with the particular kind of anger that has nowhere to go. Rick kept saying someone should sue them, and my mother kept saying you cannot just sue a company like that, not without money for a lawyer, not at her age, not with how long these things take. Nobody in that kitchen thought there was a real way out of this. I did not correct them. I stepped outside for air. And that was when I overheard something I was never supposed to hear. Hale was on a call in the parking lot of a nearby restaurant, loud enough that his voice carried, telling someone that the sale was almost finalized and that clearing out a few legacy liabilities before the books closed was going to make the numbers look a lot cleaner to the buyer. He laughed at something the other person said. Old paperwork, he said. Nobody ever checks old paperwork. I did not think about the photograph I had taken in his office a week earlier. Not yet. Not directly. But something about the case number printed on that page in the corner of his desk sat in the back of my mind the same way an unanswered question sits, quiet, waiting. My phone rang while I was still standing in the driveway. I did not recognize the number, but I recognized the area code, and my stomach tightened before I even answered it. I stepped further away from the house, past my mother's car, out of earshot from the kitchen window. Mitchell, I said. The voice on the other end asked to confirm my full name, my title, and whether I was free to talk about an active case file first thing tomorrow morning. I looked back at the kitchen window, at my grandmother's silhouette still sitting at that table with her cancellation notice folded in her hands, and I told the voice on the phone that tomorrow morning would work just fine. I walked back inside a few minutes later, and when my mother asked who that was, I told her it was nothing important. It was not nothing important. And my cousin Megan seemed to sense that the moment she wandered into the guest room where I had set up my laptop for the night. You have been weird all month, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Buried in casework, I told her, which was true enough to say out loud without saying anything at all. She glanced at the thick binder open on the bed beside me, its spine labeled only with a case number, no company name, nothing that would mean anything to her. I closed it before she sat down, not fast enough to look casual, fast enough that she noticed anyway. You sleeping at all, she asked. Not really, I said. She asked if it was serious. I told her it was just paperwork, the kind that takes months to get through. I checked the clock on the nightstand. Almost 10. I have an early morning tomorrow, I said, bigger than this, and I slid the binder into my bag before she could ask what this meant. Whatever was waiting for me in that binder would have to wait a little longer, because the next morning, before I even had a chance to open my laptop, my grandmother called me first. Just let it go, she said, before I could even say good morning. I do not want to cause more trouble over this. I asked her what happened. Nothing happened, she said, which was the same thing she said the week her hip started hurting and she waited 4 months to tell anyone. I am 80 years old, she said. I do not have the energy to fight a company with lawyers on every floor. I told her I was not asking her to fight anyone. I told her to let me look into it a little more. She went quiet on the phone in a way that told me she had already decided this was over, even if I had not. Across town, inside Hale Manufacturing, Gregory Hale was standing in front of a small group in a glass-walled conference room, the kind with a calendar mounted on the wall where someone had circled a date in red marker weeks earlier. The circle had gotten darker over time, like someone kept tracing over it every time they walked past. Sale closes in 11 days, Hale told the room. Anything sitting on the books that could complicate due diligence needs to be cleared before then. Someone asked about the pension file flagged the week before. Hale waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. Handled, he said. Family made some noise, nothing on paper, no attorney involved. Nobody is going to pull 30-year-old vesting records for one retiree. He said it with the kind of confidence that comes from doing something enough times without consequence that you stop expecting any. I did not know any of that yet, not the exact words, not the room, not the calendar. I only knew what I felt sitting in my car in the office parking garage that morning. Badge already scanned. Laptop open on my knees before I had even gone inside. An email notification slid across the top of my screen. Just a subject line, cut off after a few words, something about an active federal inquiry. A case number I recognized immediately because it was the same one printed on the binder still sitting in my bag. I did not open it. Not there. Not in a parking garage with my engine still running and my badge already clipped to my blazer. I closed the laptop screen halfway, sat with my hand flat against it for a moment, and looked up at the elevator doors on the other side of the glass, the same doors that would take me up to a floor I had never once mentioned to my own family. I did not go up alone. 2 colleagues met me by the elevator, both in plain suits, neither carrying anything that looked urgent, which was exactly the point. We took the elevator to the same floor I had sat on a week earlier, except this time the receptionist did not ask us to wait. She looked at the credentials clipped to my blazer and picked up the phone before I even said a word. Hale was already standing when we walked into his office, straightening his jacket the way people do when they sense something is wrong but have not figured out what yet. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, then stopped, his eyes moving from my face to the badge clipped at my hip, then back to my face again like he was trying to make the 2 versions of me line up and failing. "I am a senior investigator with the Employee Benefits Security Administration," I said. I placed my credentials flat on his desk, in the exact spot where my grandmother's folder had sat 1 week earlier. He did not sit back down. "This has nothing to do with your grandmother specifically," I said, and I watched something in his face shift when I said specifically like the word itself had weight. "My office has been building a case against this company for months, before I ever walked in here with her." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I recognized the pattern the moment I saw her file," I said. "The same pattern showing up across dozens of other names." Hale's hand moved toward the phone on his desk, then stopped halfway, like he had already realized there was no one left to call who could undo what was standing in front of him. "I have something you need to see," I said. I reached into my bag and set a single folder on his desk, closer to him than my credentials had been, close enough that he could reach it without standing. He looked down at it. He did not open it yet. I thought about my grandmother sitting at her kitchen table the day before, telling me to let it go, telling me she did not have the energy left to fight people like this. She was wrong about one thing. She never needed the energy. She just needed someone in the room who already had it. Hale finally opened the folder, and I watched his eyes move down the first page, then flip to the second, then the third, his hand slowing with every page like the weight of the folder was increasing instead of the pages inside it. 47 documents, I said. Internal audits your team altered. Vesting records changed after the fact. Email threads between your office and payroll going back 14 months. He did not say anything. This is not just my grandmother, I said. There are 31 other names in that folder. People who worked here 20, 30, in some cases closer to 40 years, all flagged the same way, all denied for the same manufactured reason, right before your sale was set to close. His face had gone the color of the folder itself. You said nobody checks old paperwork, I said. My colleague already has copies of everything in that room, and everything on the servers your IT department thought was archived. Hale reached for his phone again, and this time he actually picked it up. But my colleague standing near the door simply shook his head, once, and Hale set it back down without dialing anything. 2 more agents walked in behind us a few minutes later, and one of them read Hale his rights while the other began speaking quietly into a radio about freezing all accounts tied to the company pension fund effective immediately. I am placing you under formal notice of investigation, I said, for violations under ERISA, along with financial exploitation of elderly plan participants under federal elder protection statutes. Hale looked at me the way people look at something they cannot quite believe is real. You were her granddaughter, he said, like saying it out loud might change what else I was. I am both, I said. Security arrived a few minutes later to walk him out, and every desk on that floor went still as he passed, phones lowered, conversations cut off mid-sentence, the entire office watching a man who had once bragged about clearing legacy liabilities get escorted past the same cubicles where those liabilities used to sit as people. I stayed behind just long enough to confirm the account freeze had gone through. Watching a technician's screen fill with the same case number that had been sitting in my bag for weeks. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I glanced down. My grandmother's name on the screen and incoming call, nothing more. I had not told her anything yet. She had no idea her phone was about to ring with news that would change everything, and for one more second before I answered, she was still just an 80-year-old woman who thought she had already lost. I answered the phone before it could ring a third time. "Sarah," my grandmother said, her voice tight in a way that made my chest tighten too. "Someone from the company just called. They said something about a settlement. I do not understand what is happening." I sat down on a bench outside the building before I said anything else. I did not want her to hear whatever was happening around me, the agent still moving through the lobby, the case that had just closed the moment it truly opened. "You are getting your pension back," I said. "All of it. Back pay. Interest. Everything they took." She went quiet on the line long enough that I asked if she was still there. "I am here," she said, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "How, Sarah? How does something like this just happen in one day?" I told her I would explain everything when I got there, and I meant it, though I still was not ready to say the rest out loud, not yet, not over the phone. Within a week, the story was no longer just ours. A local news segment ran a short piece outside Hale Manufacturing headquarters, a reporter standing near the entrance explaining that the company faced significant federal penalties, and that every employee whose pension had been altered in the past 2 years would be receiving full restoration with back pay and interest. Hale was terminated by his own board 3 days after the investigation became public, the announcement buried in a brief internal memo that used careful language like separation and going forward, though everyone who had watched him get escorted out already knew what those words meant. He was facing personal liability and a permanent bar from ever managing a retirement plan again. The letter that arrived at my grandmother's house this time was different from the last one. It came with a formal apology, and it was delivered in person, not mailed, by Diane Foster, the same young assistant who had once raised her voice at my grandmother like she could not understand her own paperwork. Diane stood in the doorway holding the envelope with both hands, unable to look my grandmother directly in the eye for more than a second at a time. "I am very sorry, Mrs. Mitchell," she said, and this time her voice did not carry that same tone at all. My grandmother took the envelope, set it on the same kitchen table where the cancellation notice had once sat, and thanked her, calm, gracious, nothing like the anger the rest of us still carried on her behalf. Later that evening, after the check confirmation came through and the medical procedure was finally rescheduled, my grandmother looked at me across that same table. "How did you even find all this, Sarah?" she asked. I smiled, but I did not answer right away. I set my tea down before I finally answered her. "I did not go looking for this because of you," I said. "I was already building this case months before your letter ever came. I just did not know your name would end up inside it." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers, the same way she used to when I was small and could not sleep the night before school started. "I never set out to save my grandmother specifically," I said, more to myself than to her. "I followed the evidence. The truth did the rest." Sunlight came through the kitchen window that afternoon, warm across the table. Nothing like the cold fluorescent light in that office where this all started. My grandmother's medical procedure was back on the calendar, this time with family driving her, not a cancellation notice folded in half. A few weeks later, I drove past the old Hale Manufacturing building on my way to another case, and I noticed the HR office on the 3rd floor sitting empty behind the glass, boxes stacked near the door, a small printed sign taped to the entrance. "Under new management." I did not stop the car. I did not need to. They thought she was just an old woman with no one in her corner. They were wrong about who was really watching.